kids are awesome and raise just very intelligent, gifted kids, energetic kids. And
that'd be the right adjective.
Yeah. I work with them at camp, or I hear about them at camp, so they're great kids, and it's an honor to have Brother and Sister Barley from Hobart, and I know you're going to enjoy them. Thanks for Barley for coming. Love you, buddy.
Thank you.
Do you want, after this lesson, take a break, or how are you doing that?
Yeah, since they just ate and drank. Might be important.
We want to say, we're so glad to be here. I hope I address all of you. It's great to see this wonderful crowd.
Yes,
Saturday
awesome.
morning. We're happy to be here, and I can echo much what the pastor said. We love your pastor and his wife. We have a great relationship going back many years, and it's easy going. We laugh a lot, and I honor and respect them. Great leaders. And also, just want to say, it's good to be with Isaac and Liz. Isaac comes over and preaches for me here and there, and when I'm out of town, he came last weekend, so thank him for that flexibility, and I guess his father for letting me come over. But anyway, we are excited to be here, and one thing, first of all, I'm glad that you guys took your Saturday morning to come to a marriage thing. Some of you may have had your arm twisted. Well, we really don't have any magic for you, but I think, honestly, just you being here, you'll absorb some things, and generally there's an upswing in your desire to kind of work on your marriage, and I know that's a word sometimes we don't embrace readily when it comes to marriages, but we're going to give you some, not just theory, but actually we're going to give you some things that really do and work on throughout the year, and some exercises, some ideas, because we want to go beyond just today and just talking about the concept of marriage and so forth. Because here's the deal: you guys are married or going to be married, and so you're stuck with one another. Generally, that's a good thing. And if it's not, we hope to maybe head you down in that direction. But just I said that on purpose because it just makes good sense. If you have just good sense, and I know not everyone has good sense, but common sense is not so common. But if you have good sense, it makes sense to work on your marriage or to work on something you're stuck in. It just makes good sense to try to have the best relationship you can. And every one of you, at one point or another, really liked each other. Okay? No matter what you, on a scale of 1 to 10, no matter what you would rate your marriage or relationship now, at one point you probably would have rated it a 10. And so if it was before, it can be again. And you
Right.
it really can. You just have to believe that and take some steps to work back toward that. And marriage is really about trying to be the person you need to be for that marriage. And really trying hard to be the person you need to be for that marriage.
So I want to echo what my husband said. It's such a pleasure to be here. We count it an honor that you invited us and trusted us today with all these lovely couples. So it's great to see you. Great to see you here investing in the most important relationship that you have here on this earth outside of your relationship with God. And anything that is going to be great is going to take investment. And so that's what you guys are doing today. You're investing in your relationship and in your marriage. So before we get started, I want to lay out a couple of rules. Number 1 is no pointing out your spouse's faults. Okay, that's not nice. It's not going to help. And so when we're up here, I don't want to see any elbowing and like that. No pointing, none of that. So that's rule number 1. And then rule number 2 is I want you each to recognize that you really cannot change the person sitting next to you. All you can do is work on yourself and work on creating the kind of environment that is conducive to a happy, healthy marriage. So rule number 2 is recognizing that you can't change your spouse. You really only can change yourself and create the right kind of environment. And so
that's where a lot of people get stuck. A lot of you say, and I don't mean just you, but in general, if they'll change, I'll change. That's really the wrong approach.
So we sit in our corners waiting for our spouse, our partner to change, and everybody's just playing the waiting game. But it's kind of like this. It's like a farmer that wants to have an incredible crop. He doesn't go out and look at the field and just criticize the crop and the field. You stupid field, there's nothing even there, and just gripe and complain about the field. No, if he wants to have a harvest, he's going to go, he's going to plant the ground, he's going to plant the seed, he's going to till the ground, he's going to work on the field until it becomes a harvest and becomes a crop. And that's what we're going to do with our marriages. We're going to till the ground, we're going to plant the right things into it, and that's how we're going to see we're going to reap the benefits that way. Okay, so that's my rules for the day.
So we're going to start with the lesson, Adjusting to Marriage. You all have that?
Do you have an extra one? Yeah, that I can have it. Why don't I take yours? I can show you. I don't need it. I don't need it. I'd rather her have it, yeah.
Okay, adjusting to marriage. We're going to look at some concepts of marriage and kind of build from there today. One of the things that is a fact is that throughout our lives we gather information about what an ideal marriage should look like. And some of that comes from the media, a lot of it comes from our parents, some of our friends. And based on those examples in our life, then we set out to create and have some type of fulfilling marriage ourselves.
And it's important to realize right now, the society and the culture that we live in, marriage is really under attack. And so we can't look outside to see, okay, what kind of marriage do I want to have? We have to look to the main source, which is the Word of God, to figure out what can we do to have the right God-fearing and God-honoring marriage.
Burning with love's passion, man. Engaged couples get together and they're filled with wonder and expectation and they're eager to get married. And then one day you wake up after you're married and the love's not there, the joy's not there, the peace is not there, and you wonder what happened, where did it all go, why, how am I where I am? And so when this happens, there's just a few options you have, and it starts into our fill in the blanks. Number one.
Your first fill in the blank is you can leave.
So that's one option you have when you wake up and realize this is not the man I thought I was marrying, this is not the woman I thought I was marrying, I've made a big mistake. You can leave. Of course, we don't recommend that, and that's not what God expects or wants. But that is an option, and that's an exit that a lot of people take these days. And that's not God honoring, and it's not good for you. This is what you need to know. Statistically, that is not good for you. And yet we do make decisions that hurt us because we think in some odd way that it's going to help us, and it ends up turning on us. And so leaving or divorce is not a good option. It's not good financially, it's not good emotionally, it's not good relationally, it's not good in parenting, all of that. The second option you have.
Number two is you can conquer.
You can conquer, you can be in charge, you can overwhelm, the stronger partner wins. You can nag until you get your way, or you can gripe until it all falls in place in your mind.
And you can win and think, oh, this is great, I've won the battle. But then the other partner's not happy, and the other partner's not in a good position, and so the relationship is unraveling.
There's no equality there. And so the third option, which is obviously what we recommend in the Bible, is compromise. And it becomes, your space is it's not your space or my space, it's our space or our things. And this applies to your time, your friends, your holidays, your money, and all of that. And so this is kind of the goal that we want to achieve, where there's complete unity and compromise, and both people in the marriage are being equally fulfilled. Very, very important. And so that's what we're going to go toward today. So checking out the Bible just for a moment, we're going to follow the Bible in our lessons. I think that's good and important. The Bible doesn't command us to be committed to a marriage, which we might heretofore thought, but the Bible commands us to be committed to a person. Marriage is the description, not the goal. And so a contract marriage, and that's your fill in the blank, or a contract marriage philosophy says, if I will, only if you will. Like we mentioned a moment ago, I'll change, I'm waiting for them to change it, and I'll change, and we'll make this thing better. That's kind of a contract. It's by the letter of the law. And so in a contract marriage, the first thing that usually goes is your romance and your intimacy. And it really begins to unravel from there. But a covenant marriage philosophy says, I will if you want. That's your next fill in the blank, a covenant marriage philosophy. And so we want, that's the idea, of what I think the Bible portrays as marriage, and that's what we're going for. In a covenant marriage, selfishness becomes selflessness, and the marriage reflects that type of relationship that Christ has with the church. Very important concept, because marriage, believe it or not, marriage is a type of God and the church. And when you get types messed up, we have to pay for it. You look in the Bible, when Moses messed up the type of speaking to the rock, and he struck it instead of speaking to it, there was consequences for him. He messed up a type. And so marriage is a type of God's relationship with the church. And we want to make sure that we fulfill that obligation. So looking at the Bible in Genesis, I'm just going to go through some things that I really think are helpful when you understand the real concept of marriage. The Bible says, go ahead.
So Genesis chapter 2 verse 18 says, "The Lord God said, it is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him." So first of all, we have to stop and realize that God created marriage. This was God's idea. It was God's design. And everything that God creates is good. And so he meant for marriage to be good, for it to be for our nurture, for our help, for our admonition. It said, "I will make a helper," because it's not good for man to be alone.
So the helper here doesn't mean necessarily an underling or a servant. The idea was that man needed somebody to join him, to be with him. And so marriage is an antidote to loneliness. Marriage is an antidote to loneliness because, as she just said a moment ago, it's not good for man to be alone. And so a lot of things happen when you're alone. Psychologically, mentally, behaviorally, a lot of things happen that not always good. And so marriage is a very good way to walk through life. Amen.
So continuing in Genesis chapter 2, verses 22 and 23, "Then the Lord God made a woman from the rib he had taken out of the man, and he brought her to the man. The man said, 'This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man.'" So
what you see here is unity. They belong together. The Hebrew word here for rib can be side or part, took apart. And so it's not just an insignificant bone or part that was taken, but literally the side to make a helper. And so it's important to understand that concept. And Genesis going on.
Verse 24, "For this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and they will become one flesh. The man and his wife were both naked, and they felt no shame." So we see here in Genesis 22 the foundation that God created for marriage. So we're going to go through these verses and break them down a little bit and see some foundational things that God laid out for marriage.
In this initial record of marriage, this is the first thing we read in the Bible about marriage. And there's four things that I want to bring out here that you need to really bring into your marriage. And this is what I want you to kind of, while we're giving you these fill in the blanks, that you kind of inventory your own marriage in life. Do you have these? Number one is the law.
Law of priority.
The law of priority. Okay, and the Bible says in verse 24, "For this cause a man shall leave his father and his mother." And so a man leaves his parents. It's severance. A very important concept. This is what a strong marriage is built upon, the law of priority, making your relationship a priority. And many of us, if we'll be honest, sometimes we go through seasons of life where maybe they're not, that our spouse is not such a priority, or the marriage is not such a priority. But you need to fight to keep that thing a priority, that marriage a priority.
So we see the principle of severance. The man leaves his parents, so he's severing himself as far as priority from his family of birth, and he's cleaving to his wife. So a strong marriage has to demonstrate some key factors here. Number one, being behavioral independence. So your parents are no longer going to tell you what to do. They're not making the decisions in your life. You've left that priority, and now you're in a priority with your marriage. So you need behavioral independence.
Sometimes parents or in-laws can be, very nippy, very bossy, and try to involve themselves in the marriage. Usually this causes trouble. And so if they don't know their boundaries, you need to help them perhaps in a very gentle way, but you've got to have you know, if you get married and you're depending on your parents for their input and tell you everything that you need to do and not do, you shouldn't probably got married in the first place. And so behavioral differences.
So this is, let me just be clear, this is not about relationship. Obviously, it's honoring to have a relationship with your parents or your in-laws, but it's about priorities and about just influence, total influence, and somebody inserting themselves where there's no boundaries. So the next fill in the blank here is emotional independence.
Okay, so you need to, care more about your spouse than your parents. There needs to be an emotional separation.
Or other relationships. Maybe it's your buddies, maybe it's a sibling or your best friend. Your number one priority now is your spouse, not other relationships.
And then the final one there is financial independence. This is a big thing. You need to make your own living and not be dependent on your parents for support. Now, I understand there may be, when you're initially going, maybe times that they're more established and you're not, and they need to come alongside you. Now, I'm not saying that they can't ever help, but there needs to be some goals and some behavior that demonstrates that you are financially independent. Otherwise, you're probably not really ready to get married. And so the law of priority is about allegiance. Where's your allegiance? And even though you're continuing to honor your mother and father, your husband or wife must come first, very important. And if you fail to do this, eventually your relationship is going to erode somewhat. Abandoning the family of origin has to do with dependence. The man and the woman no longer look to their mom and dad, but they look to one another. And so it's an important thing. You leave and you cleave. And so marriage is designed, as it's back on your notes, for a special commitment between two people. It's your second highest priority. And I want to underscore that. Your marriage, what you're doing today, right now, is your second highest priority. And I mean that. Even in consideration of your kids. Your marriage, that relationship, your kids' relationship, the parenting relationship comes very natural. You don't have to very often work on loving your kids. Sometimes you do when they're teenagers. But generally you don't have to work on that. And you don't ever feel like I can't stand my kid until they become teenagers. Okay, then once in a while you feel that. But with your spouse, you have to work on loving them. And you have to, and there's a lot of days where you're just like, I don't really need to be around them today. And so it's not as natural. And that's why I say it's the second most important, because the kid-parent deal is fairly natural. That's a pretty natural thing that's going to kind of happen on its own. But the marriage is, it's two people coming together that are different. And if you don't do things proactively to keep it together, it'll fall apart.
So it's important when you start having children that you don't just get swept away with this relationship with your children and you neglect your marriage, because your marriage is the best thing that you can give to your children is a healthy marriage and a healthy relationship with your spouse. And so if you get carried away with just you're investing all your attention and all your energy on your children and you neglect your spouse, and I mean typically it's more women that have the tendency to do that, but you neglect your spouse, then that relationship is going to begin to fissure and there's going to be weaknesses and frailty there. And then one day your children are going to be gone and you're going to be stuck with this person. And if you haven't invested in this relationship at all, they're going to be a stranger to you. And so it's really important. Again, it's all about priorities.
I'm feeling anointed right now. You're just going to areas that to get dicey here for a moment, because I don't know you all. But what she's saying is really, really true. Because a lot of times, and it tends to be more female than the male, just because of our God design. But when you have a child or children, you begin to pour into them at the expense of your marriage, and your husband gets set aside. And all your emotion, all your time, all your passion, everything's into the kids, and nothing's for your husband. And you start, instead of sitting by your husband in the car, you're in the back seat with your kids, or and finally the husband leaves the marital bed because you got all the kids in the bed. So there's the lack of intimacy. There's no intimacy between you two because you just don't have time. And this is a big problem, and the guy will withdraw. I'm not saying he'll leave. He just kind of, okay, this is how it's going to be. I'm just going to sit over here on the sideline. And it deteriorates your relationship. And so, like she said, I want to reiterate that. The best thing you can give your kids is a good marriage. is a good marriage, and not one where you're better friends with your kids than you are your spouse. Because your kids will develop most naturally and have the most emotional, I think, security when they see mom and dad really love each other. Mom and dad have a really good bond. So it's important.
And if we go back to the verse that we originally looked at, God gave you to your husband to be a helpmeet, to be a companion, so that he would not be alone. So just because you have children, now it's not okay for man to be alone. God said it wasn't good for man to be alone. So even though you have children, you
So when
still
we have
have
kids,
to.
we emotionally abandon our spouse sometimes. It's a problem in some relationships. So just be aware of that. The actions on this first one for priorities: list your priorities, prove those priorities, and protect those priorities. So a little action points along the way. We're going to give you so much stuff that every week I'm going to ask you. I'm going to just do it up front. Every week I'm going to ask you and challenge you to set aside some time to just focus on your marriage for at least 3 to 6 months. And when I say that, it can go anywhere from a date night, or it can just be put the kids to bed and sit on the couch. It can be a walk. But if you'll spend at least an hour a week for 3 months or to 6 months, you will see a marked improvement in your relationship. And here's the payoff: your happiness. That's pretty good. Okay, number two,
the law of pursuit. So we see in the Bible it says, and shall cleave to his wife. So we see the severance from the parents, and now the cleaving to one another.
So this is a complex unity. Man, they become one flesh. And it's not the melding of two personalities to form one, but now it's two individuals that have two separate personalities, but they're living and working in concert. So you think of more of a concert, where you have different instruments. The woodwind instruments are not the same as the brass instruments, but they work in concert. So it sounds good together. It feels right together. And so, we see people that get married and one personality is so dominant that the other just blends into them. That's not really the thing. You should be who you are, but you come together and you work in concert, and it's almost like a choreographed dance, where everything is just wonderful. You have two people, two partners, but it's just a beautiful display of unity. And so that's what we're talking here, is unity and the law of pursuit. And so the fill in the blank is work at keeping your marriage as much as you worked at getting your marriage.
So sometimes, we'll counsel couples, and one of them will say, "Oh, I just don't love them anymore." And what that really means is, I just don't feel like pursuing this anymore. You have to pursue your marriage once you have it as hard as you pursued it before you had it. We've counseled couples that they had to get married. I mean, it didn't matter who was against it, who was going to try to stand in their way, how wrong it might have been. They were determined they were going to get married. And then shortly thereafter, they need to counsel every other month because they just don't love him anymore. And it's just as simple as you have to work as hard to keep it as you work to get it. And so it's all about pursuit, continuing to pursue that relationship.
Now think about this, guys. When you were chasing your wife-to-be, you worked at it. I got to set a date. When can we go out? I got to make some extra money. I got to buy her a gift. I've got to call her. I want to call her. You didn't think of it in those terms, but you were proactive and intentional. And so then when we get married, we stop those things, typically. Not always, but we stop those things. But I got to get her a gift. I got to be sweet. I got to see if she can go out. And we stop that, and we're just living together. And so if you would turn that back around and do those things and pursue them, it would transform where you are.
Whatever you set your mind and heart on, you will get it. Whatever you set it towards in your marriage, you'll get it. If you set your mind and heart towards having a great relationship, you're going to get it. You just are going to have to work and invest in it.
So here's an action point here, and again, I'm going to say this many times because I think it's important. I'm going to draw your attention to some real life, tangible action, little things you can do, exercises to kind of bring togetherness and solve some issues and grow together. And so each of these have a little action step that you can literally talk about when you do that hour thing. But here it is. Number one, remember how it was. When's the last time you guys rehearsed your dating years? Every so often, a lot of times around our anniversary, we'll go through, our dating was unique and different because she's from California, I'm from Indiana. And we only saw each other really a handful of times, literally probably together make it, I don't know. But the point is, it's interesting and unique, and it brings back those feelings. When you talk about those things, it tends to bring them back. So remember how it was, repent how it is.
Everybody underline that.
and repeat how it used to be. So those are some things you can talk about. Number 3.
The law of possession. And they shall become one flesh.
This is the becoming one is intimacy. And so anything that's not submitted to joint ownership and control, I think will very likely produce a violation of this marriage principle or bond. People that, often marriages you find they refuse to surrender money. It's my money, their money, or careers, or they won't surrender time. There's many things that some of us hold on to and build boundaries around. Jesus said in Luke 14:33, any of you who does not give up everything he has cannot be my disciple. Jesus is not saying that you've got to give up everything, but we must submit everything to his authority. And so that's kind of the same thing in marriage. I think you should keep your individuality. You can have your own interests, your own hobbies, and do some of those things, but it's the concept, I submit that to this marriage, and if it's in violation or hindering the unity, the relationship, the intimacy, then I want to demonstrate that this marriage is much more important. And so sharing everything, back to your notes, is the marriage, in the marriage is true intimacy. It is the intertwining of your life with one another, and this level of intimacy requires immense trust and enormous vulnerability. And that produces a bond and literally unity. And so the act of becoming one flesh, I think, is much more than just sex. It involves the merging of everything that we have owned and everything that we are, and putting it there for the marriage to sort that out in the relationship. So the actions are answer these questions. Are you completely surrendered to your spouse, to that marriage? Again, you can, one night, sitting on the couch after the kids are in bed, you can sit down and just talk about this and question one another and investigate it and unpack it. Is there anything you're holding back? Okay, number 4.
The law of purity. And the man and his wife were both naked and were not ashamed.
I want you to talk about nakedness. And that means openness. Openness. And one of the things that, it's literal, but I think there's some figurative things here to unpack. They were naked, but physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and I think sin is probably the greatest obstacle to this type of openness. And when we're not right, we cover up. As soon as Adam wasn't right, as soon as Eve wasn't right, they covered up. And as soon as we're not right in a marriage, we begin to cover up. And we keep our spouse out of that area of our life. And it can be serious, and some of it's not so serious, but still it's a cover up. And we keep them out. And so being pure and open, it really goes in all the way down to your phone is open. Your spouse can have ready access to your phone, your email. I'm not saying that you need to share the same social media pages. Some of you might, or profiles. But there's an openness. You know what I'm talking about? I'm just using something that we have every day. There's an openness, and it's very important. And that leads to and demonstrates purity. And I think that this is important, to have a kind of relationship where there's complete and total openness. And so the actions that you take in this is take responsibility for your own behavior. Don't return sin for sin or hurt for hurt. Admit your faults. Forgive and speak the truth in love. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Go ahead.
Okay, so moving to the section that says a closer look. Marriage is no longer honored by everybody in our society, and we kind of touched on that a little bit, how our society and our culture is tearing down the whole idea, the sacredness of marriage.
And so it's under attack, and it's totally normative now in our culture and society to have a breakdown and split, but it's not God honoring, it's not God's pleasing, it's not God's will or desire. So
it's really important to realize that love alone is not enough of a foundation for a successful marriage. Because we, in our culture, associate love with an emotional feeling. And I guarantee you, at some point in your marriage, if you've not gotten there yet, at some point, those feelings are not going to be there the way they were when you were dating or when you were just falling in love. So love is not enough. Within a short time, usually those feelings of euphoria, they're gone, and in their place sometimes comes anger, hurt, disappointment, frustration, bitterness. All these feelings can creep in, and so we don't feel like we're in love. So we need something stronger than just the feeling of love to build our relationships on.
Because culture's against us. I mean, people dismiss it, they delay marriage, they demean marriage, they denounce marriage, they discourage marriage, they relegate marriage to this, just this unimportant thing that people do. They redefine it, they ridicule it. And so we're coming back to really what marriage is all about and trying to create a center for us to build from in this first lesson. So people don't know the basic of why marriage matters. And we need to know that. Marriage, to many, is just this magic thing, and it makes everything better, but it's not, because here's your fill in blank. Marriage doesn't solve your problems. Marriage doesn't create your problems. Marriage reveals your problems. So if you're cranky before you get married, you're going to be, your marriage is just going to reveal it. If you're a perfectionist, your marriage is going to reveal it. If I'm fearful or insecure, my marriage is going to reveal that. So your marriage is not really the problem. Whatever issues you have, it's not your marriage. It's you.
So you get
it's
you get down the road a little bit and you start experiencing some of these problems, and then you start thinking, oh no, did I make a mistake? How can I get out of it? I married the wrong person. Or you just start having these thoughts of regret. And just a good point to remember is that just because something isn't easy doesn't mean it isn't right. Just because you don't have those same feelings of love or you don't feel all that emotion does not mean it's not right. It just means now you're in the stage where you need to really start working at it. And so you have to just put the work in to keep the marriage alive. And soon you'll discover what maybe makes you feel loved doesn't make your spouse feel loved. Or your expectations or desires or needs are different than your spouse's. And so you get in this situation and it's like a perfect storm. It's like a perfect storm. Everything seems like it's coming against you. And so the reality is sometimes we become more like our parents than we realize or than we want to admit. Or we grew up with the way our parents were, and so maybe we're following their patterns of communication or their habits, and maybe they're unhealthy. And so we need something a little bit stronger to carry us through.
So let's look at the different stages of marriage, and I think I'd like for you to kind of maybe, if you have the courage, to maybe circle or star the stage you think you are in. There's 5 of them, and so I think this is you'll begin to see this and probably be able to identify each of these stages in your own life. Number one is
romance.
Romance.
The Song of Solomon says, "Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for your love is more delightful than wine. Pleasing is the fragrance of your perfumes." This is how you all talk to your wives, right? "Your name is like perfume poured out. No wonder the maidens love you."
This is how it all starts, and then it's all downhill.
This is what you texted each other this morning, right? Straight from the Song of Solomon.
We leave this station quick.
So you can't live on love if romance is all you have.
That's your fill in the blanks. You can't live on love if romance is all you have. And this is the time and era of your relationship where a lot of infatuation and so forth.
When my husband and I first started dating, like he said, he was in India and I was in California, and he would come visit and everything was just, oh babe this, and oh babe, I'm so happy you're here, and babe. Finally my cousin said, what is babe's name anyway? So we've been there. We know what that emotional stage is like. So romance.
They still call each other.
Yeah. Stage 2 is reality.
They say love is blind and marriage is the eye opener.
This is about the second time you hit the snooze button. Reality. They say it's here's a joke, you guys ready? It takes
He has to prepare you so you're ready to laugh.
because they're not that
Or
funny,
you
so,
get sensitive.
so you have to know that it's a joke coming, so if somebody has a cue card laugh. It takes two to make a good marriage, a single woman and an anxious mother. Okay. So after the marriage, you guys know, reality sets in, and this is the time that where you wake up, and that love spell, that infatuation is kind of tarnished a little bit.
And all of a sudden you find out your spouse has faults you never knew about.
There's things that bug you about them. The honeymoon's over. The real vision of the rest of your life, becomes a nightmare. And you're like, oh my Lord, what did I do? And it's this stage that you discover that the human things that you thought were cute are now like a pebble in your shoe.
You find out not only is your spouse human, they don't load the dishwasher, they don't put the toilet seat down, they don't take out the trash without you basically setting it in their pathway. So you
walk around that.
So disappointment and early conflicts are common, and they're basically unavoidable.
And the things that you used to love, now you despise. You were in love that she
Don't
had.
be too personal. I'm getting nervous.
You used to love that she had drive, and now she's never home. It kind of turns from the positive to the negative. Or you used to compliment her for being attractive, and now you say she's self-centered. And and so those things kind of start changing and tarnishing what it was.
You used to think he was so disciplined, and now you just think, well, he's just self-centered. Or, you used to think, oh, I love how outgoing and fun-loving he is, but now you're like, well, he never wants to be around me. So what the thing hasn't changed. It's just your viewpoint has changed.
So reality reveals what romance conceals.
That's your fill in the blank. Reality reveals what romance conceals.
And so this is the part of the marriage where we wake up. They say that the sea of matrimony is filled with hardships.
You didn't advance notice.
I'm just saying it's advanced here. 5 words that a wife says that she never really means is, I hope you're happy now.
You're quick.
You guys are better than my church. They literally flash up on the overhead. Laugh. So it doesn't hurt my feelings.
They might be doing that.
Okay, so your next fill in the blank, you may be in the reality stage if you find you are beginning to get to know each other's real strengths and weaknesses. And so you're communicating less, and it's a little more contentious. You find your spouse maybe preoccupied with the kids or money or home or work or anything, business, career, anything but you. Stage 3.
Stage 3 is resentment. Proverbs says, a quarrelsome wife is like a constant dripping on a rainy day. Restraining her is like restraining the wind or grasping oil with the hand.
Romance, reality, resentment. Some of you might be here or have been through this territory.
So resentment comes when our spouses don't meet our needs. You fill in the blank. And this is a stage where turbulence.
Yeah, so when you don't feel like you're getting enough sex, you don't feel like you're getting enough support, you don't feel like you're getting enough help, whatever, fill in the blank, you kind of tend to withdraw and resent, and things begin to unravel. You got to. This is when it's like when you get sick, you got to do something to get well, and this is when your relationship is starting to kind of get sick, and so you've got to do something. And as she said, this is the stage that turbulence begins, and so you start living kind of your own lives. You kind of withdraw a little bit. You kind of you're together, but you're not really together. It's either marriage is either a holy wedlock or unholy deadlock, and this is that stage where you're it's right here. And resentment says that you've been cheated. When you resent, you feel like you've been cheated. You're not getting what you want. And it's a very critical spot because you can spin off into a really negative place. You can. And I think this feeds divorce. This feeds divorce. But you can take the steps to get back to romance. Romance, reality, resentment. So we begin to focus on what we want and need instead of what our spouse wants and needs. We mentioned this before. This is a critical part of a good relationship, understanding that you invest what they need. And so, you guys ready for a joke?
Yes.
I just got to make sure you're ready. A husband went to a marriage counselor one time. He said, counselor, he said, my wife went from hard to get to hard to handle to hard to take. That was good.
That one over really good. You might want to scratch that one.
I like the support I gave from my Stage 4, rebellion. Rebellion. You miss your friends, you miss your toys, you miss your time, you miss your travel, you miss whatever. And so self-interest begins to overtake because you've got resentment, and resentment undealt with turns into rebellion. And all that anger, all that hurt, your needs not being met, you don't think it's fair, it's not right, they don't like me, they're not like they used to be, it turns into rebellion, and you just don't want to deal with it any longer. So you begin to lash out. This is when you become very argumentative, and there's a lot of tension in the marriage, and every word is kind of a cutting type word. And so the rebellion is the result of months or years of neglect. It's the result of neglect. You've neglected the relationship.
So now you're both standing in your own corners. You have your arms crossed, and you're just waiting for them to do something. You're not going to make a move till they make a move.
You're done with it. You might be a good person. You're not going to go anywhere. You're not leaving, but you're done with it. And sadly, a lot of people live this way. Really, really do. It's really sad. But there's hope for you. We're going to give you that hope today. There's a lot of power struggles in this stage. Power struggles. And sometimes the kids get caught right in the middle. They become collateral damage.
You start keeping score. Well, he didn't do this, he didn't do that, so I'm not going to do this, or I'm not going to give because he didn't do what I wanted.
So the fifth stage is the stage that if you've gone through, you got to get to, and that's rebuild.
Proverbs 29:18 says, where there is no revelation, the people cast off restraint, but blessed is he who keeps the law. Rebuilding your marriage is possible if both of you want to rebuild it.
You wake up and you come to a marriage seminar.
Ta-da!
On a Saturday morning. And you just need to be slapped in the face, proverbially, not literally. But you need some direction, some advice, some help, some encouragement.
Read some good books.
Yeah, and hey, this is awesome. And your pastor, his wife will bring books in here. You guys need to be readers. Readers are learners. And if you read one, I challenge you to read one relationship book a year. Just one. That's not much. But every time I read a relationship book, our marriage gets better. It does, for a day or two.
But in this stage, you realize that you need to come back into harmony with your spouse. And you begin to pray, and you begin to ask God to come and intervene in your marriage. And that can't be highlighted enough. That you start seeking God and saying, you know what, God, I've made some mistakes. I haven't done everything to have a godly marriage, but I need you. I need you in my marriage. And you start inviting God into your relationship and inviting God into your life to help you be the kind of spouse that you need to be. And you stop keeping score and you start saying, you know what, I'm going to be this kind of a wife because I'm doing this unto the Lord. God's asked me to be a certain kind of wife. I'm doing it for him as much as I'm doing it for my husband because he's required certain things out of us. And so you start deciding that, you know what, I'm going to do it God's way. And you stop your selfish ways and you stop keeping score and taking inventory and just thinking about yourself, and you start doing it God's way.
So remember what we said at the beginning of this lesson, is marriage is a type of God in church. And so when you get marriage wrong, you're missing the type. And so you guys are good people, you love God, and so that's all the more reason for us to mirror to the world, to your family, what a good marriage is really about.
So the best way to energize your marriage, are you guys ready? B is for blessing.
Pray for them, genuinely. And don't pray that they die.
And then E is for...
Hold on. It's hard. It's hard to despise somebody that you genuinely pray for. Right. I'm not just talking about saying, God, help my spouse get better. But genuinely pray for them. E is for what?
Encouragement.
Encouragement. E is for encouragement.
So a woman needs to know that she's loved, and a man needs to know that he's respected. And so women, let me just talk to you for a minute. It's very important that you show your husband respect, especially in front of your children. And this may seem awkward or weird, but if you can start the habit of in front of your kids just saying, kids, you have the best dad. He works so hard. We're so blessed. He's such a great spiritual leader. Whatever it is, just start building your husband up in front of your kids. You are giving them the greatest gift because you're modeling how to respect your husband. You're modeling a good marriage, and you're modeling how to be a godly wife.
And it's vice versa. And we do this in our marriage. It's awkward when our 21-year-old is sitting there. We do this. We've done this for years, but at the dinner table, we'll just launch in and say, kids, you got a great mom. I love her. She's wonderful. I'm committed to her, committed to this marriage. And I think those are good things for kids to hear. They hear too much in our world that is not positive. And you praise your spouse. It's a good thing.
S is for sharing. So blessing, encouragement, and sharing. Best ways to energize your marriage.
So, you want to share life. That's why you got married, I thought. You want to share life, have a partner, have a relationship. We're built for relationships. And so sharing not only the workload, but and the responsibility, but sharing really is, as they say, caring. And you share your hearts. Very important that you share your hearts and not just the chores. Letter T.
T is for touching.
Touching, very important. And this is not just speaking of sex, but touching in the sense of being gentle and the shoulder, the hand, putting the arm around, and expressions of intimacy that I think go a long way. 1 Thessalonians says, "May the Lord make your love increase and overflow for each other and for everyone else, just as ours does for you." And so a good marriage is not perfect. Okay, you need to understand that. Those of you that are engaged here today, it's not perfect. Marriage is not pixie dust. Your life's not going to be all of a sudden better.
Marriage is not about changing someone. It's about loving someone even when they don't change.
But it's learning to overlook some things and learning to get better yourself. And you'll never be happy always trying to change somebody else. But work on yourself, God first, spouse second, and then self third. 3 basic needs of a husband. We're coming toward the end here.
Number 1, I just touched on this, but they need to be respected. If a guy doesn't feel respected, he doesn't feel loved.
He feels dismissed.
Yeah, so, again, moms, don't tear your husband down in front of the kids. Don't complain and grumble because you're frustrated and then put that on your kids. Number 2, they need to be needed. And you may not realize this, but men need to be needed, and they figure much higher in your thoughts. You figure much higher in their thoughts than you probably realize. Number 3 is they need to be fulfilled. If your husband feels fulfilled in his relationship with you, he's not going to be out seeking fulfillment elsewhere. So he needs to feel respected, needed, and fulfilled.
And so, on the other side, number 1, wives need to feel and receive affection. Okay, affection is very important. And to a guy, I know this means sex, but to a woman, this means hugs and hand-holding and tenderness. Okay, and that's a very important concept of what is needed in the marriage. Number 2, Women need to be given positive communication, okay? Women need to be given positive communication. They're very communicative as people, as to their gender. What? And they need to have times where you sit down and you talk to them. And it's not just business talk.
And you have to realize, men like to give solutions. Women like to explore the ideas for a long time. So sometimes
This is what we're still working on.
I'll be like,
You want to know the spot in our marriage we're working on is this right
we're
here.
having company over for dinner. What should I make? Boom, make beef and carrots.
I make decisions.
I'm like, what?
Okay,
Do
hold
you
on.
think
I
they'll
solve
like that?
problems for my life.
Do they?
And so when she brings me a problem, I solve it for her, but she
I
doesn't
don't
want
want
to
a
solve it.
solution. I want to talk about it.
She wants to talk
Do
about
they
it.
like beef? Would they rather have Mexican food? Maybe we should do Italian. No, I already gave you the answer. I'm like, I don't want an answer. I want to talk about it for like an hour.
So then I say, call your mom.
In your notes.
I'm still working on things, but yeah, this is true.
It is.
This is true. They say, honey, what should we do? I think about it and I go, bam, because that's my personality. Bam, I'm going to solve a problem for you. That's what I do. And then they're not satisfied with that answer,
No.
and then I'm confounded.
Because why?
You just asked me for a solution. I gave it to you.
No.
That wasn't good.
Why? What does number 2 say? They need communication.
Yeah.
Okay. Number 3.
Okay. Sorry that we are the problems. They need to be gifted with commitment. Very important that you give security, commitment to your spouse, men, it's the necessary component to build a good, healthy marriage and relationship. If they're never secure, if they don't feel you're totally committed to this thing, and I say this to her as we just mentioned in front of our kids, but I'll say it to her just in passing. It's kind of weird and strange even to hear it come out of my mouth. We've been married. This will be our 27th year coming up. And this is the 27th year, or June is when we were married. But I'll tell her just randomly at times, honey, I love you, I'm committed to this. I'm not going anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought I'd mess her day up and tell her I'm not going. But for what it's worth, I want to put that out there. That's how I feel, that's where we're at, and we're going to make this work. So, honey, lead us through. It's up to you. I'll let you.
Okay, so the next section on your paper, do you guys have this section called Working Things Out?
Yeah.
Okay, so these are some activities that we want you to do together. We're going to give you a little bit of time. I don't know if we'll take the time to get all the way through them, but we want you to at least get started so you have a feel for it.
It'll take about 5 minutes or so to get
But
some
you're going to
people-
look through these
But right
statements.
now, look through these statements.
And consider on your own, not with your spouse. Ask yourself if these apply to your marriage. Like, number 1, after we got married, the romance was done. Don't look at your spouses, just answer it on your own, and then you guys can compare them a little bit later.
So this is what's cool. You can write while I talk. This is what's cool. This is yet another thing that you can use in your 1-hour date every week, okay? To talk, to argue, to fight.
And then it comes down to some things I expected about marriage. Just kind of glance over all this and start answering some of them over the next couple minutes here. And then we're going to take a break. We'll take a break in like 5
Well,
minutes.
we're not quite. Yeah, just stay where you are. You got to talk together.
Yeah, and we'll give them 5 minutes to do that.
Oh, that's okay. Now, most likely you will have different answers to some of these questions. That's okay. That's probably good because you are different people. Then after you get through those first 12, it goes on to say, consider the following 3 categories. Can you come up with at least 2 things to put in each category? Things I expected about marriage that turned out to be true, and so forth. You can kind of just, there's a method to the madness here. Your answers to these questions will reveal what stage you are in, really. Some of you may be in resentment, and your answers will show it. Some of you may be in rebellion, your answers will show it. If you're in the romance stage, your answers will show it. And so, give you just a couple more minutes to go through this, and then we'll conclude for this lesson. Okay, so I'm going to get your attention. We're going to complete this session right now. You may not finish. That's okay. Look at the section together at home. This is what we're asking of you. If you really want to work on your marriage, even if you have a good marriage, communication can only help. So, as I mentioned a few times during the lesson, I'm asking you to not just take what you get here, but carry this on through your life for a little while, and commit to 1 hour a week for 3 months minimum, where you get together. And guys, it's best if you initiate it. You're supposed to be the leader, and it's a good quality if you'll initiate it. But women, if they don't, then certainly you should. But as we've been saying throughout this lesson, sit down. You can go on a date. You can go on a walk. You can sit down on the couch. You can go to dinner. You can talk over lunch. Whatever, it can look in many different ways. But talk about these action points and specifically the 5 stages. And go through these answers that some of you just filled out. Don't argue about them, because their perspective is their perspective. And if you're smart about it, you should listen to what they're saying. And they may say, as soon as we got married, the romance is over. And you may think, no, it wasn't. What are you talking about? Well, that's their perspective. Hear it. Right. Probably the situation you find yourself in is because you've been ignoring it and living in false reality. And so listen to them. It's valid. Validate it. Don't invalidate it. And then talk it out. And so find out what stage you're in. And this is how you start to build back. Rebuild. Remember, rebuild. This is how you begin to build back and get what you used to have. So thank you very much. I guess we'll take 5.
Let's take
use the restroom.
about 8.
About 8. Okay.